Have you ever wished you could add and manage events in Google Calendar from your Google Sheets? So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through how to create a app script that'll do just that. And so let's look at our calendar real quick, make sure it's blank, and then let's go ahead and run our script and watch those populate right in the Google Calendar. And there they just popped up into our Google Calendar. So if we go back to here, we can see our current status, and we have these event IDs that we can go back and update or delete these later. So let's say we want to delete this event, we can go ahead and run that again, and then that midweek lunch will disappear here in a second. And there it's gone. So let's jump right into the script. So we'll go ahead and create that by extensions and app script. And while that's loading, we're going to find our calendar ID. So if you pull up Google Calendar and then go to that calendar that you want to find here, and then under those three dots on the right hand side, go to settings and sharing. And then we want to scroll down until we find this calendar ID. All right, and so when we go to our script, we're going to add this at the top. We're just going to declare this variable calendar ID and put that right there. And then we're going to continue on. So let's go ahead and just name this. We can call this calendar. And then I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can follow along a little easier. So what we're going to do first is set this up real quick, get a couple things added here that we're going to need. So first of all, as we go through, we need to determine what we're going to add or edit or remove. And so we're going to do that using a drop down here. And so we'll add that drop down, and we're going to call this add update, or our last one will be delete. And then I'm just going to change these to just an arrow instead of a chip under the advanced options, and then click done. So now this is good to go. And so these all need to be added. So I'm going to go ahead and select those. Then we're going to proceed with the other things that we need here. So next I'm going to add a calendar drop down here, just make this easier. So I'm going to click on this top one, hold down Control, and click on my top row just so I have the rest selected. And I'm going to go to drop down again, and then change this from drop down to is valid date. And I'm just going to do reject input. And then that allows me to select date just like that. And then finally, under these start times, I'm just going to make sure we format this. We'll just pick that one there. And then that will allow us just to type in. So you can do 4 p.m., something like that. And it'll automatically convert it to a time. And then that will get us, these are text fields here to add a title, description, location. And one thing here, you can add an actual address as well if you want that address to pop up in the Google Calendar. If you want to add any emails for the notification. And then here we're going to do a checkbox for if we want to send an invite email. And then over here, we have current status. This will get filled in from the script. And then event ID, same thing. And then we got start and end time. So what these are is on a single day event, which is what we're going to cover in this video. We want this date and start time through this date and end time. So what we need to do here, just to make this simple, is combine those. And so I'm going to just use a little array formula trick here. And then array formula if, and I'm just going to do if this C is blank, do nothing. And I'll indicate that by 2 commas. So an if, you're doing true or false. And so then here, I can just do B2 plus C2. And then wrap that up. And so this is called an array literal, this curly brace. And then I'm putting that title right here, a semicolon to start for the next row. And then in this array formula, I have this option to show that time plus date. So right now it's showing up as a number, and we can go ahead and format this. Should be just date time here. And then you can see now it's combining the date and the time. And so I'm just going to basically copy and paste this and just modify it for end time. And then here, I'm just going to change this to D, just like that. And now we have the same thing showing up for start and end. So we're going to use this in the script. This just makes it a lot simpler and easier when you're creating calendar events, because this is what it wants, is a date timestamp. All right, so we have everything good to go here. We're not going to do invitations on these, but this is how you would send it, is by checking that checkbox and adding email. And again, you can separate multiple emails with comma. So we have enough set up here to get going. And so let's go back to the script. And then first thing I'm going to do is actually add a menu. We don't want to go into the script to run this, so I'm going to add a little menu that'll show up next to help. The way we do that is we'll do a onOpen function, and this will run every time you open the spreadsheet. And then to create a menu, that's through the spreadsheet app.getUI method right there. And then we'll create a menu, and then we can call the menu something. So we can call this calendar script or something like that, or you could say update calendar, whatever you want there. And then we'll do add item, and then you do the title, and then this reference the actual script. And so I'm going to call this, let's just say update calendar, something like this. And so we can call this update calendar maybe, and then comma, and now we do that function name. And so you can see that little helper text here telling you the same thing. So that function name is going to be this right here. So you can either copy and paste, do whatever you need to, retype it, just make sure that matches. Then finally, period, and add to UI. So if you can see here, and this is how a lot of this goes in this TypeScript, is use these periods to append a method. And so we can do multiple methods on this UI that we declared here. All right, so that's it for this onOpen menu. I'll just put a little comment there. And then this is our main function. We'll iterate through data and determine if we are adding, updating, or deleting an event. So what we're going to do here is we need to get this data, and then we need to determine what our action is selected, if any. So if we had one here that wasn't selected, we don't want to run it. So we only want to run whatever we have selected and the appropriate action. So we're going to start with add here, and then we're going to run through the rest. So let's go ahead and get our spreadsheet, and I'm going to do that through SS. I'm going to call SS, and then we're going to get the spreadsheet app, and then get active spreadsheet. And so now we have a reference to our spreadsheet, and then we can get the sheet. So the spreadsheet is the whole thing, and the sheet is the individual tab. So we're going to get that sheet, get sheet by name, and I believe we called it calendar. And so there's that. And then we can now get our data or our events. And so we can just maybe call this events sheet.getRange. And then we're going to start at row 2. We don't need this top row here, so we'll start row 2. And then next thing is the column. We'll start with column 1. And then how many rows we want to turn. So we can do sheet.getLastRow. And then since we're starting on row 2, we're going to subtract 1. And then finally, how many columns do we need? And we could count these up. And so here, this would be column, and it's giving us a date there. So I can rewind here and figure this out. So that's 11. So I could be 12, 13, something like that. Or I could format that. So 11, 12, 13 columns. And then we'll get values. And then now we can just iterate through each row. And we'll do that using a for loop. And that looks just like this. And then now inside this for loop, we're going to take each row and figure out what we need to do. So let's just get a single event. I'm going to say let event equals events I. So what I'm doing here is I is our iterator, and so we're going to start at 0 because this is an array. Where we grab this value is an array. And so what we're going to do is go row by row. So what we're going to do with this is our array is this data here. And then in the array, this is 0, row 1, row 2, etc. So that's why we're starting at 0, not 1. So it's not super intuitive, but that's just the way it works. It starts at 0 instead of 1. And so we start at 0, and then while I is less than the length or the number of rows, we're going to continue on, and then we'll do I++. So once I is equal to the length, then it'll stop. And so basically this just allows us to go row by row and go through our data. All right, so what we're going to do here is let's first of all make sure that this is not blank. And so we'll do if event, and then just the same as the row starts at 0, we're looking at now event, and that's a single row. We want to look at this first column. And so we can do this bracket again and do 0. And so in this row that we're calling here, we're grabbing the first column, and if it's not equal to blank, then we're going to continue. Otherwise, it's going to basically ignore it and continue iterating through each row. All right, so what we're going to use here is we have multiple conditions that could be, so it could be add, update, or delete. So we could do a couple if statements, or what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a switch. So switch will be, we take a input, and so it would be this, because this is our add, edit, added, updated, or delete. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. And then inside of our switch, we basically use a case. So case add, and then what do we do if it's add? And then, so we'll do this. I'm going to add a new object here. So what we're going to do is, for example, when we create this event, we want to return that event ID for that Google Calendar event. So that way, if we want to update or delete it, we have that ID so we can go reference it. So we need to pull that back when we create it. And so I'm going to do this thing called let returned data. And so what we're going to do here then is returned data is equal to, and we'll do add event. And then we're going to take this row of data that we have and shoot it. So I'm going to make another function called add event. And so this one's called update calendar. We're going to make another one down here called add event. So let me go ahead and just create that now. Function add event. And then we have that event data. All right. And then if that happens, we want to break out of this switch statement. And then we can make our next case. So our next case would be if it's update. And then we're just going to do the same thing. Return data, update event, and shoot that event over there. Otherwise, and then break. And then finally, case delete. Return data equals to delete event. And we'll do event there, just like that. And then our final break. And so typically in a switch, you do a default. In this case, we're not going to, just because we're not going to have anything else. But that is normally what you would do as a final default. Now, so what we're going to do here then, so if the event is not blank, then what we want to do is our return data, we're going to put a status here in the event ID. And so that's what we're going to return in this return data. It's just a little array with that. So if that's the case, then we want to do sheet.getRange. And then again, this is going to iterate row through row, but we're starting at 0. So if we had this first row, we don't want 0, we need 2, because that's row 2. So we need to convert that back to our normal numeric. So we're going to do I plus 2. Now let's get us back to what we need. And then we need to add starting in here. And so if I check my column here, this should be 10. So 10, and then 1 row and 2 columns. And then we're going to do set values. And we're going to do that return data. I'm just going to make that return data a flat one. And so with this set values, we need to put it inside these brackets. So I'm not going to go into crazy detail on that, but that's just what we're going to need to do there. All right, so this, let's make sure we don't delete any of those. This will give us, I need to make that returned. I was looking at this was grayed out a little bit because I didn't have that correct there. All right, so this should iterate through. One more thing we need to do here is once we're done, we want to reset this. So what we're going to do here is a final sheet.getRange. We'll start in row 2, first column, and then get our last row here. And again, -1, and then we're just going to do one column. What we're going to do here is just a clear content. And so after we've processed all of these, what we're going to do is just delete them. Just so we can track that we've completed that, and so we're not redoing it multiple times. All right, so that should get that one, and then let me create the rest of these. So function update event, and then we got that parameter there, and then finally function delete event. And again, we got that event there. All right, so now we have our individual functions to do these things. And so what we're going to do now is just put together those actions. And so let's start with our add event. And so first of all, let's just get some data from our event. So our event here is going to be a single row. So we need some things like the title. And so this is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm just going to start with that. Let title equal event 4. And then what else do we have? Description, location. All right, so let me go ahead and run through the rest of these. All right, so we have these variables in here now. And so we can go ahead and finish up. So one of the things we want to make sure is, let's say this is blank and this is false. We don't want to accidentally pull those through. And so let me go ahead and start with let calendar equal calendar app, get calendar by ID. And then we have that calendar ID at the top. And then we're going to return our ID from our event ID. So let's go ahead and look at this create event. So let's create event. We have title, start time, end time, and some more things here. Start time, end time, and options. So this options is an object. And so you can see here, this one's adding, for example, like the moon. So what we want to do is get our title. So we can do our title, our start time. So we have that one, end time. And then we need to add our options object. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to call options. And then we're going to actually create an options object. So an object is like this. So we have had, let's see, I don't know if we've created an array. So an array is like this. And then object has these curly braces. So the array is what we've been dealing with. And so we've been referencing it with this for loop and with these numbers. So an option, however, is a little different because we reference, instead of numbers, we do things like option 1 and then option, something like that. So that's how that works. So what we're going to do here is actually dynamically create our options here. So we're just going to iterate through, let's say, if description is not equal to blank, then we're going to add a description to our options for our calendar. So we're just going to do description just like that. And so what this will do is if we don't have a description, it's not going to add it. So we don't have an error. And so we're just going to do the same thing with location. And this will be called location. And then let's check if there's any emails. And in Google Calendar, this is called guests. We're just going to call it that. And then finally, we have a checkbox here. So checkbox is either true or false by default, unless you change that. So what we're going to do here is do notify. And so what this is doing is checking if notify is true, then we'll continue. And then this one will be options, send invites. And then we'll just make it equal to notify. So if we want to notify, then it'll set it as true. All right, and then so we already have our calendar, and then we have our calendar create event. Now we try and tie it back to this ID. So what we want to do after this create event is we want to get the ID. That way we can return that. And so now I'm actually going to create a little array. And so we're going to do return, and then we're going to do added and ID. And so what this will do is it'll take each row, pull this stuff out of it, create the event, and then send that ID for that event back to this function. And that's where it's going to set that right here. So what it'll do is it'll say added and that event ID. All right, next, let's look at modifying an event or updating an event. And so we have update event, update event. And so what we're going to do here, let's go ahead and just grab these instead of rewriting that from scratch. And we'll throw that in here. And then we already have this one in place. Let's go ahead and do that. And then what we need to do is get our event ID. So we'll do let event ID equal to event. This would be 10. So that was right before start time. All right, so now we can get this event. Calendar get event by ID. And we'll do event ID. So now we have that event. And so now we can update it. So this event, and here's the different options. So we're going to set time, and then we'll do that start time, end time. And so we're just gonna do this just to make sure it may or may not be the same, but we're just going to go ahead and just set it. And so now we'll do set title, set description, and set location. And then we're going to say if emails not equal to blank, then we're going to add those emails as well. Add guest emails. All right, so there's a quick update edit here. So in this method here, the error I had in the first go round was that this does not allow you to add multiple emails at a time. And so I'm going to show you how to quickly modify this. We're just going to add emails equals emails split by comma. And so if you add multiple emails, then you can split them right here. And then what we're going to do is just modify this method. And we're going to do emails for each. And then we're going to use a arrow syntax here. And we're going to take that same this event, add guest, and use this X. And so what this will do is it'll take any emails that you have, split them by comma, and then for each email, it will add it to the event as a guest. And that will address that there. All right, and then we can go ahead and let's see, we have that event ID here. So we're going to create another object here, and we're going to return modified, and then that event ID. All right, and that will do that one. And then finally, we just need to do this delete event. And so we just need to get that event ID. This one's very simple here. Event 10. And then we'll get that calendar and event. And then once we have that event, this event, and then we can do delete event. And now we can just do return deleted, and then we're just going to return a blank string because that is now no longer an event. All right, so now we have all of our functions in place, and let's go ahead and test this out and make sure that I did everything correctly. So I'm going to go back to here, and so the on open, once we refresh this, that menu will show up, and so I'm going to go ahead and do that. That script will disappear for now, and there's our new menu. So I can get back to the script by going to extensions and app script, just like that. And then it shows up right there. And so to authorize the script, I can either do it from here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if I do that, it's not going to run the first time, so I'll have to run it twice. Otherwise, I could just pick a function here. So I could do on open, for example, and hit run, and it'll ask me to authorize it from here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it just from here. And so here's that permissions, and select my account. Now this part is just Google's little scary warning because they didn't write the script. So I just want you to make sure that you didn't do anything funky or that someone else didn't do something funky in there. All right, so go to advanced, go to untitled project here, and then click allow. And that's just what it's asking permission for. And there you go. Now that's done. And so now if we go here, we should be able to run this script. So let's go ahead and check it out. Let's run that script. Let's see things popping up here in a moment. Oh, look, there it is. And deleted. Looks like it ran successfully. Let's see if those showed up. Well, look at that. There is our events. And you can see all our notes, our location, etc. Perfect. All right, let's see if it will modify. So let's say this Tuesday morning coffee, we realize we want to set this to 10 a.m. and then 10 to 10:30. Let's go ahead and do an update. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you accidentally screw this up and you have the wrong time, that will make it not work quite right. It has to be after, not before. So set modified. Let's see if it changed it to 10 a.m. And there it is. Looks like our meetings are at the same time. Yes, they are. And if it doesn't show up immediately, you may just refresh your calendar. Sometimes it takes a second. So at this point, we may want to bump our meeting here to 10:30 a.m. And let's update that one. And then once we see that modified, looks like that one's done. And then there we go. Now it's bumped. Let's go ahead and delete this midweek lunch and update. And let's see if that one on Wednesday disappears. So it's deleted there. Let's check. It's still showing up. Let's refresh. And now it's gone. All right. So that is it for today. I hope that helps you to see how you can use Google Sheets to more easily streamline and manage your Google Calendar. Keep an eye out for a follow-up video where I'm going to add in colors into your events. So instead of just doing the standard color, you can pick the colors for the events and some other cool options as well, like multi-day events or all-day events. All right, so like and subscribe if this was helpful for you. Make sure to check out the other videos on our channel. And as always, have a great day.